Before the video starts, here's a quick shout out to Pragyan, Visharad, Nitish, Senorider Bix, and Geet. For a shout out in the next video, type your comment, like the video, and make sure that you're subscribed with notifications. The comments with the most likes will get a shout out in the next video. I get it, there's plenty of motorcycles out there for you. You have friends who have different tastes in motorcycles, and their advice has you in splits. Some prefer the classics and have been raised with the philosophy that more metal equals more motorcycle. Others prioritize performance, power to weight ratio, and technology. But you're somewhere in between, aren't you? You want to fit in with both crowds while still standing out. You want heads to turn when you're cruising, but you don't want to be left behind when throttles start getting twisted. Don't worry, a gun company from 1689 has the perfect motorcycle for you. Wait, is this script right? After providing the Swedish army with muskets, Husqvarna made their first motorcycle in 1903. They manufactured motorcycles that even competed at the Isle of Man TT back in the day, but saw real success when they entered the world of motocross, where they continue to be a dominant force. Today, we are reviewing this, the Husqvarna Vitpilen 250, the Neo Cafe Racer and the one with the more aggressive riding position from the two. Now, to understand why it looks like it does, you need to understand the term cafe racer. See, in the early 1960s, motorcyclists in London used to challenge each other to short sprints within the city from one cafe to another, much like the illegal chapri races that take place in Mumbai from Reclamation to Marine Drive and back, but without the skinny jeans, mushroom haircuts and flip-flops. With weight reduction and handling being the main priorities, these motorcycles were stripped down, had sleek designs, low clip-ons and rear set foot pegs, much like the racing motorcycles of that time. With the Neo Cafe Racer, you get all of that with a few modern touches. LED headlight, tail light and LED turn indicators too. A fully digital instrument cluster, upside down forks, and ABS that can be switched between road and supermoto modes. Barring a few components here and there, most of the motorcycle is based off the Duke 250, which has already been successful in India. But you already know the spec sheets. Let's talk about how the riding experience is. Now, I've been riding this motorcycle in the city for a few days and on the highway for a bit also. And the seat on this motorcycle, while it isn't the most comfortable seat in the world, it isn't the worst either. I'd be able to last comfortably in the seat for about an hour and a half, and after that, it starts taking its toll on you. Now keep in mind that you can adjust the preload on the monoshock at the back, but that would only do so much for you. So eventually it would get uncomfortable. But then again, if you know what cafe racers are meant for, comfort isn't on the top of their priority list. Nice mask though. Oh, Chapri's gonna chop. The handling on this motorcycle can't really be flawed. I think it's one of the better handling motorcycles that I've got my hands on in the recent past. And that's saying a lot, especially from someone who's had the chance to ride motorcycles like the RC390 and even the RTR 200 4V on the racetrack. Also the RR310 on the racetrack. And I think this handles really well. So some of you had a question about whether this motorcycle would be a good track bike. Well, in terms of handling it would, but there's a lot of other components that go into a track bike that this lacks. I don't know if you can hear that right now on the GoPro, but the radiator fan has just kicked in. Now, going by the information on the heat gauge, if you can see, it's at about the halfway mark when the radiator fan started. And that's a good thing because it takes care of the heating issues very early on and prevents it from escalating. The radiator fan stays on for about 30 seconds if you're moving, and just as I say that, it goes off. And for about a minute and a half if you are stationary. What I did notice is that the radiator fans that they're using on these Husqvarna 250s is the same radiator fan from the 2015 KTM RC390 and other KTM models. It's the one with the shroud, which I spoke about in a recent video that I posted about resolving the cooling issues on my motorcycle. And if you know what I think about that radiator fan, at least for the 390 engines, you know that I'm a bit skeptical about the cooling abilities of this radiator fan. I think that's pretty much the only flaw that I can find about the motorcycle at this point in time. And again, it's really not a flaw, because for the 250cc engine, I know that they've been using the same radiator fan on the Duke 252, and I haven't seen any complaints from Duke 250 owners about the heating issues on that motorcycle. So maybe it's meant for this motorcycle, but not for a 390. Yep, no point in a divider. Might as well just ride wherever you want. Yeah, but it does turn a lot of heads when you stop at traffic signals and even when you pull up to your local cafe, I guess. And that's, well, one of the reasons for that is because the motorcycle itself is new, so there's not a lot of them on the street right now. But I think the design philosophy behind the motorcycle makes it kind of stand out. You know, people see a retro headlight, a round headlight, and they expect it to just have one of those halogen bulbs in there. And then they see the LED strip around it, they see bright LED lights, indicators and whatnot. And the lines on the motorcycle are also pretty pleasing to the eye. It's got a nice flow to it. So while it is minimalistic in design, it still manages to stand out from the crowd. So if seeking attention on a 250 is what you're out to get, then this motorcycle will keep you pleased in that department at least. Suspension duties are handled by a 43mm WP upside down fork, which is the same equipment that you'll get on pretty much any KTM currently sold in India. The suspension isn't set to be the most plush, but again, like we've been discussing through this video, the purpose of this motorcycle isn't to be a comfortable motorcycle. It is to be able to zip through the city and handle really well while doing that. Someone's got to stop. Oh, thank you. He called me a rider because I'm riding a motorcycle. Now, some of you had questions about the top speed of this motorcycle. Let's test it out. Just kidding. When it comes to the engine performance, a lot of you were asking me whether this is a motorcycle that you can have as your first motorcycle. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of people who buy 250cc motorcycles as their first motorcycles now in India. And that's not a bad thing if you are a sensible rider. If you're not, then maybe you should get a 150cc motorcycle first and then get accustomed to what that can do and then upgrade to a 250. The engine on this delivers quite a bit of power. In fact, more power than its non-Bajaj and KTM rivals in this segment. And it almost touches upon the heels of its bigger 300cc rivals. Almost. The fuel cap on this is pretty good looking. It almost makes you not want to curse the rising fuel prices every time you fuel up. Almost. Both the Husqvarna Vitpilen 250 and the Svartpilen 250 come with a 9.5 litre tank. And for this one, if you're using it like it's supposed to be used, just for cafe runs and maybe for office commutes and the possibility of a weekend ride also, then you really wouldn't find yourself wanting more fuel. Take it from me, I own a KTM RC390 that has a similar fuel tank, at least in terms of capacity, and I don't really regret buying it because of the small fuel tank. Mileage, since a lot of people ask me that question in the Instagram story that I put out, asking you guys to ask me questions, I'm putting those figures up on the screen right now, city and highway mileage figures too. And there goes the radiator fan again. The brakes on this motorcycle work really well. Not to the extent that you have to worry about falling over the handlebars, but really well. I like that they've given it the same 320mm front disc that the 390 gets. The brake pads, though, I don't think are sintered. If I'm wrong, I'll put that up on the screen. But I don't believe that they are. Getting the thumbs up from a cyclist too now. That's a first. A lot of you had questions around the engine vibrations, and for the most part of it, this motorcycle is smooth, and it's nothing out of the ordinary that you wouldn't expect from a single cylinder engine that makes this kind of power. So in that sense, I think it's pretty refined. The overall build quality of the motorcycle is very refined. There's a lot of attention to detail. Most of the parts are put together very firmly, and there's very little you can do to flaw the motorcycle apart from say that it's not meant for you because it's a little aggressive in its seating position. That's the only way you'll get ahead. Husqvarna. No chance he's understood that. Just like people don't understand my name the first time I see it. Still getting them eyeballs. The tires on this are MRFs, and they provide an excellent amount of grip both in the dry and in the wet, and even when leaned over, which is something you'll end up doing a lot of once you get comfortable with this motorcycle. The other good news is that they are the same size as the tires that you get on the KTM 390s, which are sold in India. So looks wise, nothing's compromised either. Finally, I know that these mirrors are designed to be part of the whole retro theme with this motorcycle, but they do function equally well. There's no point in time during my time with this motorcycle, in the city at least, that I've had to do head checks every now and then, because while the handlebars are pretty low, I think the mirrors are in the right position to give you a good view of what's behind and besides you too. And that's always a nice thing. Needless to say, the wind blast on this motorcycle is pretty significant, especially when you start to ride a little spiritedly. But I think that adds to the whole charm of the motorcycle. Not everyone is going to be riding at really high speeds on open highways, so every now and then if you feel that wind, even in the city, it's a good thing. Pillion comfort. I know a lot of you have asked me that, and if you're a slim rider, then your pillion would be comfortable on this motorcycle. If you're not, then you're going to be taking up most of the seat. The way it's designed, that tail section is kind of almost chopped off, so there's not a lot of place for a pillion to sit behind there. So if you and your pillion are slim people, then the chances of your relationship on a motorcycle surviving and lasting is increased. If either of you are not, then there's slim chances of that working out. Lastly, while this tank adds a lot of the design factor to this motorcycle, I think those protrusions on the tank really add a lot of functionality too when you want to lean the bike over. And using your legs to kind of hook into that groove on the side makes it a lot easier to corner and keep the bike stable at the same time. Now for the final part of this review, let's head back home. While looks are subjective, price tags usually are not. Husqvarna has introduced this motorcycle in India, targeting a slightly mature group of urban riders who seek a bit of performance over the weekends too. But with the tempting price that they're offering this at, you could see a lot of Duke 250 and Duke 200 customers also looking at this motorcycle as their first one. The maintenance cost is pretty similar too when you compare it to the KTMs because they are from the same family in India. Now I still have to release my video of the Husqvarna Svartpilen 250, but I'm going to jump the gun a little bit here and share that my favorite from the three 250cc motorcycles that I recently had the chance to review was the Vitpilen 250. It's not the most comfortable from the three motorcycles, but it's the one that will have you grinning throughout your daily commutes in the city. If you have any questions, thoughts or feedback, do leave them in the comment section. I make sure that I respond to all sensible comments. As always guys, at least wear your helmets while riding your motorcycles and ride safe. It's a freaking jungle out there. Goodbye. What I have noticed, and this is because I have so much experience with radiator fans on my KTM RC390, is that they're using the old when you take a U-turn and was honking like a suspension duties are handled by oops, nope, I don't want to test it there. Alright, for my final thoughts on the motorcycle, we're going to finish this one indoors. Let's transition, shall we? Oh, that didn't sound right. Now, for my final thoughts on the Husqvarna 250 Vitpilen.
Boss with a great bag, came up, you can't hate that. Self-made, you can't take that. Yeah, self-made, you can't make that. Some said I need a record deal, I need a cosign, I need a Dre track.